So good day everyone. I am Matthew Lukbalukas and today I'm going to talk about Shintoism, the Japanese mythology of creation. Let's start. The islands of Japan are the subject of a particularly colorful creation myth. In Japanese mythology, the Japanese creation myth is the story that describes the legendary birth of the celestial and creative world, the birth of the first gods, and the birth of the Japanese archipelago. Myths give us insight into ancient people's lives and beliefs, and give meaning to many customs and ceremonies practiced today. The first written record of Japan's myths is found in the Kojiki, 712 records of ancient matters. This is one of Japan's creation myths in manga form to enable students to access it through simple Japanese. Now, let us dig into the story. Once upon a time, when the world was still young, floating like oil, two gods, Izanagi no Mikoto and Izanami no Mikoto, were commanded by the primal gods to make the land and fix it in place. Izanami pierced the sea with a heavenly spear, and the brine that dripped from the spear became an island where the two performed a marriage rite around a pillar. Izanami gave birth to the islands of Japan and their deities, but in giving birth to the fire god, she was burned and died. Izanagi followed Izanami to Yumi no Kuni, or the land of the dead, to urge her to return. She agreed to consult with the gods of Yomi, but warned him not to look at her. Impatient for Izanami's return, he entered the palace of the gods of Yomi, only to find her corpse horribly transformed. He fled, pursued by the shamed Izanami, and escaped by blocking the exit of Yomi with a large boulder. He then went to the river to purify himself by bathing. After bathing, some of the gods are born after he cleansed himself. From his left eye, when he cleansed it, was born Amaterasu Omikami, or the goddess of the sun. Izanagi charged Amaterasu with the rule of the high plane of heaven. Tsukushi no Mikoto, god of the moon, was born from his right eye. Izanagi charged Tsukushi no Mikoto with the realm of the night. Susano no Mikoto, god of storms, was born from his nose. Izanagi charged Susano with the rule of the plane of seas. Thus was born Japan and its surrounding world. So now we're going to talk about Shinto. Shinto is the indigenous religious beliefs and practices of Japan. The word Shinto, which literally means the way of the kami, generally sacred or divine power, specifically the various gods or deities, came into use in order to distinguish indigenous Japanese beliefs from Buddhism, which have been introduced into Japan in the 6th century CE. Shinto has no founder, no official sacred scriptures in the strict sense, and no fixed dogmas, but it has preserved its guiding beliefs throughout the ages. Shinto shrines, or jincha, are the sacred locations of one or more kami, and there are 80,000 in Japan. Certain natural features and mountains may also be considered shrines. Early shrines were merely rock altars on which offerings were presented. Then buildings were constructed around such altars, often copying the architecture of thatched rice storehouses. From the Nara period in the 8th century CE, temple design was influenced by Chinese architecture, like upturned gables and a prodigious use of red paint and decorative elements. Most shrines are built using hinoki cypress. Here's a picture of a torii. Shrines are easily influenced by the presence of a torii, or sacred gateway. The simplest are merely two upright posts with two longer crossbars, and they symbolically separate the sacred space of the shrine from the external world. These gates are often festooned with gohei, twin paper or metal strips, each ripped with 4 places and symbolizing the kami's presence. A shrine is managed by a head priest or guji and priests, kanushi, or in case of smaller shrines, by a member of the shrine elders committee, the sodai. The local community supports the shrine financially. Finally, private households may have an ancestor shrine or kamidana, which contains the names of the family members who have passed away and honors the ancestral kami. Here is a picture of a kamidana. Now, let us move on to the Chinese mythology of creation, the dragon and the egg. Chinese mythology is a collection of cultural history, folk tales, and religious tradition that has been passed down for centuries in oral or written form. There are several aspects to Chinese mythology, including creation myths and legends, and myths concerning the founding of Chinese culture and the Chinese state. Chinese mythology generally concerns moral issues and informs people about their culture and values. Now, let us dig into this story. Long, long ago, not in a land before time, but a time before land, there was nothing in the universe except an enormous egg-shaped entity. Inside the egg, the opposite forces of yin and yang were all scrambled, and it was a complete mess. But over time, the interactions between various substances and energies eventually conceived a being, a shaggy, horned giant named Pangu. For 18,000 years, Pangu slept and grew. One day, he suddenly awoke. He opened his eyes, but saw only pitch blackness. He strained his ears, but heard only an unnerving silence. Pangu found his dreary surroundings highly disturbing. Flustered, Pangu conjured a magical axe and landed upon the egg a mighty chop. The egg split into two with a thunderous crack. Slowly, yin and yang began to separate. Everything dark and heavy sank down to form the earth, and the rest, light and clear, drifted up to form the heavens. But Pangu was anxious that the halves would close up again, and so he stood between the two halves to keep them apart. With each passing day, the sky rose 10 feet further above him, and the earth thickened 10 feet below him, and Pangu himself grew 10 feet just to keep up with the growing expanse and hold on. It was a lonely and strenuous job. This toil, the conscientious giant endured for another 6,570,000 days, or another 18,000 years, until he was certain that the realms were finally stable. Then, with a great crash, Pangu lay down and died. As the weary Pangu collapsed, a miraculous transformation took place. His final breath turned into winds and clouds, his voice into rumbling thunder. His left eye blazed into the sun, and right eye gleamed into the moon. His hair and beard became stars of the Milky Way. His limbs and hands and feet transformed into great mountains, and the blood running through his veins into flowing rivers. His flesh converted into fertile farmlands. His bones turned to precious gems and minerals. His teeth and nails became lustrous metals. The hairs on his skin bourgeoned into lush vegetation, and the sweat from his extended labors fell as rainwater for the mortal world. Here's the picture of how Pangu himself, after he crashed, transformed to the different things in the world. Some say that Pangu's spirit never ceased but turned into humans, which accounts for the ancient Chinese belief that humans are the soul of all matter. Pangu sacrificed his life to create the world and his body to enrich and beautify it. Now the skies are graced with luminous celestial bodies, the earth, contoured with great mountains and rivers, and flora and fauna galore. And Pangu, the giant god who came out of an egg, is nowhere, yet everywhere to be found. That is all for my reporting about the Japanese and Chinese creation mythology. Thank you for listening.